Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm. This week, we sit down with Corby Meekins, the head coach at Lutheran South Academy in Houston, Texas. In this conversation, Coach Meekins discusses the uniqueness of coaching high school football, how he went about building successful cultures, and his experience at the college level. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Meekins.
Coach Meekins, how's it going?
Going well. Good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. Well, excited to have you on. For those that don't know, we Coach Meekins' daughter works here at the AFCA, and she's doing a phenomenal job. So happy to have her on board. She's relatively new with us, and happy to have you on. Happy she was able to connect the dots, and you take a little time with us. So to kind of get the whole thing started, the first question we always ask on every podcast is, when was that moment that you knew you wanted to be a part of this great profession?
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I knew early on, it's kind of, my dad was AD, head football coach. He coached for 25 years before he went into administration, became a principal. And, just growing up in the field house and being around it at a very early age, I kind of, always wanted to be like my dad. So, I kind of locked in, to be honest with you, that I knew that I wanted to coach when I was about 5 years old. And, and then all the way through. So, mom was an educator, and, she was an English teacher. Then she was a counselor for a long time until she retired. And, just seeing the importance of their job and the impact that they made on everybody, that was in athletics, but not just them, but the ones that were in the school.
Yeah.
It drew me to it with their examples. And, I remember I took that Air Force, I think it was the ASVAB or something like that test when I was in high school. You go through there and mark everything that you like, and it's supposed to tell you what your career path is going to be. So,
yeah.
The only thing I could do was coach. So I got the results back. So it's a good thing that I liked it.
And that worked out perfectly for you. I tell you what, what's interesting is after doing this podcast for a while, we got our fair share of guys whose dad was a coach, whose mom was a coach, or, that spent time in a profession. And it's about 50-50. A lot of people say, man, I saw the headaches. I saw the late nights. I saw the early mornings. And sometimes they wanted to get away, ultimately ended up back in the profession. And then there's, the other half, like yourself, like it was no question from the jump. You were just immersed in that lifestyle and saw the benefits of being a coach. And so at no time did you ever veer off and think, man, you know what? I don't want angry parents, in here beating on my door, or, I don't want to be up at 4:30, in off season, working out some kids, you never had any of those thoughts.
No, they say a lot of times, if you're in your passion and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then it's not work. Yeah. And that's kind of how, I've been doing it this is my 35th football season. And so I've been doing it for a while, and, every day. I think, the other thing is I've always looked at, coaching as it's an opportunity to be in the mission field. So,
absolutely.
You don't have to, go overseas, out of the country to serve, just waking up every day and going to work and doing the best you can and trying to help grow, young people and help them grow up and learn how to navigate, life is you can do that right here in your community every day. So that's kind of how I've looked at it.
Amen. Now, one of the hardest things about the profession itself is just getting that first opportunity. Whether it's at the collegiate level, at the high school level, making sure you have your ducks in a row, you know the right people, and you have your teaching cert here in Texas specifically, in a few other states, I'm sure kind of the same deal. How did you get started? What was kind of like before the first phone call? What were you doing to get prepared to take that first job there at Deer Park High School?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, I never, my dream job was being a head high school football coach.
Yeah.
Just like my dad. Growing up, you think about, it's cool watching the Dallas Cowboys and, the Houston Oilers and, the Texas Longhorns. And, you see Fred Akers on the sideline and you see Tom Landry, and that's cool. But, my dream was to be a head high school football coach. And, just like so many people that, in this profession, especially at the college level, I mean, you got to start at the bottom, and you got to work your way up, and it's an endurance test. And the thing that I would say about that is with my dad being a coach, I had an opportunity to take some high school jobs, but there was at the time that I came out of college, Deer Park High School was didn't have a ton of talent. I mean, they had some talent, but they were beating teams that had a lot more talent than them at the time. So that was a program that I really had my eye on. So I had to go to the middle school. So instead of taking a high school job, I went to the middle school and got my foot in the door. And then I had to work my way up, to the high school staff. And then from there, I went and got my first, OC job. So I think a lot of times just, having the sense, not being too prideful to put yourself in the best situation, no matter what that step is, because I've been a head coach now for a long time, and the principles and the basic outline blueprint of a football program I learned from the time that I spent at Deer Park High School, starting in the middle school.
That's right.
That's still the blueprint that I use today.
Yeah, I love to hear you say that. I recall finishing up my playing time at Baylor, and I was looking for a job, and my first job, I've said it on the podcast 100 times, is my first job was a middle school job. And when I heard it was a middle school job, oh man, I know so much football. Why would, very profitable, but I took the job because it was the only one I could get at the time. And man, when I say I probably learned more in that year, just in terms of building a foundation, building a coaching philosophy, how I wanted to attack practice, being structured. The list can go on and on and on. It was such a monumental, time for me, and I was so blessed to have the opportunity to start at the middle school before I jumped in, and probably sank, where I thought I was at. I didn't realize that, I needed that more than anything. So, you start off there at the middle school. Obviously, over the time, you work yourself all the way up there at Deer Park before coming the offensive coordinator at Carrollton High School Smith in 1998. What were, let me back that question up real quick. You had a father that was in the coaching industry. You were, like you said, were in the locker rooms. You were in the coaching staff room since you were 5 years old, or probably before that. What was one of the things that when you got into the profession you weren't necessarily prepared for, even after all that time kind of been around? Was there anything that you got there and you're like, oh man, I wasn't ready for this, and you were able to grow from?
Yeah, I mean, I played quarterback in high school, so didn't play a whole lot of defense because it wouldn't let me.
Right.
I backed up everything, but didn't get a lot of work there. And then, I thought I knew a lot of football, like you said. And, I get 47th graders, and I'm coaching them by myself. I'm coaching both sides of the ball and special teams. And, I mean, it really makes you grow. But I would say that, the one thing that I learned real quick when I got into high school ball was that, and this is, I believe this is true for any level, but you win and lose up front on both sides of the ball. If you're not any good on the O-line, D-line, then you're never going to have a chance to be a championship football team or or consistently win, because that's where it all starts. So I think that's the biggest thing that I found out, that you can draw all these pass plays up, but how are you going to protect it?
That's right.
And so for me, my biggest hole was understanding offensive line play. And I tell people the two best things that ever happened to me as far as my growth in this business was, number one, coaching middle school, and then, like I said, coaching every position and special teams, and calling plays on both sides of the ball and situations, and just getting that foundation early. And then the second thing was, I was an assistant O-line coach, tight end coach, for my first 2 years on the varsity staff. And then that's where I really learned, offensive line play, which, that's where you have to start anytime that you start talking about putting an offense together, is number one, knowing what they can do and what they can't do, and put them in a position to be successful, and being able to design plays, that you can protect and that are sound. So those are the two biggest things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That actually segues. I'm happy I kind of went back and asked that question first. It segues great into into my next question here about your first time being an offensive coordinator there at Carrollton Newman Smith High School in '98. Over those 7 years, obviously you mentioned coaching several positions and really digging into the trenches and getting to understand that offensive line a lot better and a lot more detailed. The question was, how were you preparing over that time frame to be an offensive coordinator? And obviously you kind of hit on the offensive line, but what about quarterback development, receiver development, a coaching philosophy, how you wanted to run an offense? What did you do to prepare for that first gig?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I had enough sense at the time that, I just wanted to be a sponge. So, I went from middle school coach to head freshman coach, and at the high school, which was really cool. I don't want to skip that step because we had like 125 kids. There were 4 of us. And then we had our own campus. We had a freshman campus. So nobody was around us. So it was like being the head coach at that time of a 4A high school. And so I was able to run that for a year. Then I was assistant O-line coach, and then for 2 years, and then I was the running back coach. So every step of the way, it allowed me to, the O-line coach, tight end, allowed me to, get really involved with that, which was that was my weakest part of, my background. And then coaching the running backs for 3 years, it helped me to dive into the development from the standpoint of now I'm involved in the passing game.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not coaching the receivers, I'm learning how we're coaching. Even though I wasn't coaching the quarterbacks, being with the running backs, footwork, reads, so sitting in the film room. So basically, when I left and took that first OC job at Newman Smith, I'd been exposed to every part of the offense at that point and felt comfortable moving forward.
Yeah.
And being able to coordinate on my own.
It's interesting. I'm happy you mentioned that freshman year, because there's a handful of programs, more than a handful of programs that still had that kind of ninth grade center deal where it's a separate campus. And one thing, I'm a Texas guy, like yourself, and one thing you notice about these programs that are traditionally good, they typically have I hate saying farm because that's more of a professional thing, but the middle school is very structured, and the head coach of the varsity program is involved with the development of what's going on in the middle school. Maybe not directly, but he's meeting with the middle school coaches. He's maybe even prompting them to run the same offense, at least use the same terminology. It's always I see a lot of similarities in the schools that are really, really good there. And when you have something as unique as a high school player that's semi-disconnected because he's at a separate campus. What was the communication like between you and the head coach in order to make sure that you guys were preparing them to move over there as sophomores and be ready for junior varsity and varsity if they're good enough?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, we were together all during preparation, and then, the only time that we split up was, when the season started. And, we were together during off season, because we would bus to the big campus. It was about, 2.5 miles away. So we'd bus over there and go through off season. But, making sure that everything that we did was just a watered down version of what the varsity guys were doing, terminology, and making sure everybody was in alignment. And, anyway, and then they came, they weren't able to ever come to a practice, obviously, but they were at all of our home games. So, usually when freshmen's playing at home, JV's on the road. So the OC, DC, and head coach would be at our freshman home games. And, and then after the game and, that weekend, because we would be working with the varsity staff on the week.
So you would get with those guys on the weekend and kind of.
Yeah. So even though we were separate during the week, when it came to, game planning for the next opponent, we were still, up there, which again, that was part of my process, right? It's kind of like being, a GA. You're not directly involved in a lot of stuff, but you're in the room. So you're seeing how they're arriving at the decisions that they're making to do the things that they're trying to do each week versus what they're facing.
That's awesome to hear, Coach. Now, you spent 98, 99 as the OC there at Newman Smith. What was obviously it's fun to talk about all the great stuff. What were some of the tough lessons you had to learn as a first-time offensive coordinator?
Come on now. I mean, this is a good one, So, and this is going to come up later as we go through this. Just guessing where this thing's going to end up eventually, but just reiterating, middle school head freshman coach, and then assistant O-line, tight end coach, running back coach, and then I get my first OC job, and my head coach from Deer Park took the Newman Smith job, so I actually went with him.
Okay.
And then he trusted me enough to go from being the running back coach to OC. So I coached receivers when I got to Newman Smith, because the head coach, he coached the quarterbacks at Deer Park. He's a quarterback guy. And so he was, fundamentals and all that. So, but I coached receivers, and then I had the quarterbacks, in film. So I was doing the brain work, going through the reads and, coaching them on how they needed to, do the mental part of the game. So that's when I got my hands on the quarterbacks for the first time. But when we got to Newman Smith, it was unbelievable situation because they just split the school in half and created another high school. So they went from 3,000 students to 1,900.
Oh, wow.
Playing, what's now 6A football.
Right.
And, we were in the district with Louisville schools and the Grand Prairie schools.
Yeah.
In the Louisville schools, Louisville and Flower Mound Marcus had won 2 of the last 3 state championships. So, I mean, it was really good football and tough district at that time. So that first year we get there, we start 14 sophomores and a freshman. I know that's hard to, it was unreal.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And so in that district, long story short, we go 2-8, and we only had a chance to win 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the rest of them, we had no chance.
Yeah.
Not at all. And, as a first-time offensive coordinator, I mean, you're sitting here and you're like, you're questioning everything you thought you ever knew about the game of football.
No doubt about it. I'm sure.
And, because, things aren't going well, then you have to look inside, first. And so it was a long year. It was tough because I'd never been through anything like that. But, when we got to off season, because we didn't get there till the middle of July, which is really, really, really late.
Yes, yeah.
Our coach took the job July 9th.
Wow.
So a little crazy, but that's where we were supposed to be. And so when we got to off season, we maxed, and we had 7 kids that could bench 200 pounds or more. Mm. 1 did 245 and 6 did 200. So that's not good, by the way, as you know.
Yeah, not too many Jimmys and Joes there.
So we went straight to the weight room, and I mean, for the next 8 months, we worked and we challenged them and we pushed them, and it was really the first time they'd ever had a weight program. And happy to say that we went from 2-8, and then we had everybody back but like 3 people, and then the next year we won 7 football games.
How about that?
Like, okay, well, maybe I'm not such an idiot, which I was thinking, what to do for, but we were just able to go out and compete a little bit from a physical standpoint.
Yeah,
because we were like tinfoil up front that first year on both sides of the ball. I mean, we just hit and crumpled. Mm. So, that's where, every team I've ever coached since then, that's the offensive line is the most important unit on the whole team, in my opinion, because how the whole team goes.
Well, yeah, you got to test in that lesson very, very quickly as an OC. Now, I do have a couple questions kind of off that whole situation. Number one, I'm a DFW guy myself and played against Louisville in high school around that same time. As a matter of fact, what school did they split off of? I'm just curious. What school did they split to?
Creekview.
To Creekview, Carrollton Creekview. That's
right.
Yeah,
Carrollton Creekview, right there on Old Denton Road.
That's right. Okay. That's exactly right. I didn't realize they split. I knew Creekview was new. Second question I have is, obviously on the podcast we talk a ton about transition. A lot more with the collegiate guys where you're moving from Idaho to California within a year or something like that. But when you start talking about the state of Texas, there's some serious transitions when you're going from the Houston area up to the Dallas area or to the Waco, Syntex area, whatever. Taking a job in July at any level, it's going to be tough. You just hadn't had time to build a culture, even really get to know your players at that point in time. Just out of curiosity, I'm assuming you're kind of building a family at this point in time. In July, you said, "Hey, pack up. We're heading to DFW in July to a school that's split in half, playing Louisville." Like it seems crazy. What was kind of the mindset and the thought process there for your head ball coach to take it and for you to follow?
Well, I mean, you opened up a can of worms with that question because it's a lot crazier than what it seems. So I was actually leaving Deer Park to go to Fort Bend Kempner. Okay. I was following the offensive coordinator to Kempner. He had just gotten the job.
Okay.
Anyway, so we sold our house in Deer Park, which I did not buy until the last year that I was there. And then I'm going to Kempner. So we sold it and we bought a house in Sugar Land. And we moved into it. So you know how it is when you move. You pack everything on one, you get everything packed. Mm-hmm. So you load it on one day. The next day you take it to the new house, you unload it.
Yeah.
And the third day, you unbox it. And so it was the end of the third day, and the shutters on the house were blue. And they were not supposed to be blue, right? They're supposed to be black. So I had to go get some paint. I had to get those shutters painted right now. So I'm literally, 3 days into moving that late afternoon, and I'm on the ladder and I'm painting shutters, and my wife brings those big cordless phones out there, right? She says, Coach Lynch is on the phone. And I'm like, really? And this is the head coach that had been at the park. Well, he'd actually left 2 years earlier and went to Alvin High School.
Oh, okay.
So we weren't together for those 2 years. So I'm like, I ain't heard from him. So I'm like, get the phone, and I'm talking and I'm painting, I'm like, what's going on? So, well, we just moved in our house in Sugar Land. And he goes, hey, he said, I'm looking at this job in Dallas. He said, I want you to be the OC. And I'm like, Coach, I appreciate it, but, I can't do that. I mean, we just bought this house like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
I'm painting shutters literally right now. And he said, okay. Hung up. So I told her what he said, went back to doing my task at the time. So he called me back 2 days later, and he said, hey, I really want you to go. I think, it's a good situation for us. And so I'm just like, hey, Coach, look, I can't go. I said, but I just started naming everything I could think of, all right, that you don't do in high school. I said, hey, the only way I'll even consider this is if I'm not teaching any classes. Yeah. I make this much money. They pay for my move because, moving's expensive, and I just pay for move. I said, I named about 2 or 3 other things. And then I said, and Andy Sexton has to go. And he was the DC at Deer Park. And we're really tight, best friends. And he had stayed at Deer Park. He was still there. I said, if you get Andy to go. And he said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So this dude calls me back 3 hours later.
It was hustling, huh?
It says done.
Wow.
So I looked at my wife and I go, I'll call you back. So bottom line is it was, the good Lord's going to put you where he wants you. So it was a God thing. I mean, I had not signed my contract at Kempner because this guy hadn't resigned yet. So, you can't hire somebody till you get a spot.
Right.
I was just on good faith because I'd been waiting a month to sign this contract, and I still haven't signed it. Right. And so anyway, I lived in that house 2 weeks.
That's crazy. And I do have another follow-up because we do, like on the podcast, we typically get in these type of details. Like I love to hear this because this is the reality, of this profession a little bit at times, hopefully not all the time, but at times it can pop up, obviously within respect to your wife and your household. Like what was that dialogue like? Like once you put that phone down and said, he just gave me a heck of a situation. I mean, I know my wife, we made 6 moves in my coaching career. She was saying, no, we're not moving. We're not moving again. So, I mean, how did that part of the conversation go?
Well, I mean, the reason Madison's the way she is because of mom, right? And so, she's just like, you got to be kidding me. And she goes, we can't do that. And I said, I know we can't, but, I mean, you heard what I told him because she was sitting there listening when I told him earlier that day, and just all the stuff that you just can't do. Right.
Yeah.
I said, I have a peace with it. And that, I mean, I think this is where God wants us to go. Because I turned him down for an OC job when he went to Alvin 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
And, I was 26 and, it didn't feel right at the time.
Yeah.
This felt different. And she was like, she's like, okay, if that's where you think we need to go, I trust you.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't a long, hard conversation. So that's how God's hand was in it, in my opinion, because, we went from a 2,500 square foot house, okay, in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And we go up there. This is when it got hard, is because we started looking for a rent house, and Dallas is expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, we couldn't find anything for the same price that we were paying for that house, except for a 3-bedroom townhouse that was 988 square feet. All right. So, I left in 2 weeks. She stayed there for, another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And we moved out of the house and into a townhouse in, off Old Denton Road up there. And we were on top of each other, and we had, 4-year-old, and then Madison. Now, take into account that Madison during this whole time was 5 months old.
I figured, dude, should have been around that range.
she was a baby.
Oh man.
Anyway, yeah. So we rented a place, and then we had to rent our house out, but all that led me to Westfield High School. So if I hadn't gone there, then I wouldn't have been there. So
yeah, I promise we'll get to these other pieces. But this is obviously a big time kind of situation. The other piece of it is you initially were going to where were you going initially? I can't think what school, where you moved to Sugar Land.
Oh, Kempner.
To Kempner, yeah. You were initially going to Kempner with the offensive coordinator who you had been working for the past few years, right?
Right.
And that's another tough conversation, right? It's still July for both of you guys, right? So now you're calling him saying, "Hey, man, I got a great situation. I'm heading up north." How tough? I'm assuming you guys are friends. I'm assuming it's not just a professional relationship. How did that convo go?
No, I mean it was, it was tough.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Man," he goes, "I really want you to be here with me, but I understand."
Yeah.
I mean,
Simple
a lot of people would get mad, and he didn't get mad. He goes, "It's a great opportunity for you to," and he said, "I understand." Now, I think there were some other people that, obviously that he's the only person that I had a relationship with,
right,
that was on the staff. And, his name's Randy Cunningham. And, it's a funny deal because, not jumping ahead too much, but when I became the head coach at Westfield High School, I hired him as my offensive coordinator.
Come full circle. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, so it was, he was shocked, and, but he didn't hold any grudges, and he was, and that helped me because I hadn't been on that side of it. Right. So being a head football coach for as long as I have been, and having as many people leave as I had leave over that time, I mean, I always tried to handle it exactly like he did.
Absolutely.
With me.
Yeah.
And so that was a blessing for me to learn that, because it can go two different ways, but anybody that was better in their situation, you can't ever
right
begrudge or not let them go.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. You were able to kind of take that situation, at least apply for it as yourself as a head coach when a guy's trying to maybe put a better situation for his family, or maybe he deems the situation to be better for himself. That it would be very easy for you to be upset, but you kind of think back to the craziness you were in, and that's awesome. All right, man. Well, let's kind of move along here. So you guys get there, you're turning around within a year. You probably have some moments as an offensive coordinator where the light bulbs were starting to come on a little bit, obviously with the importance of having a strength and conditioning program at the very least, and then also the importance of developing that the trenches a little bit. But after those seasons, you take the assistant head coach and OC job back at Spring Westfield High School. You're back down in the Houston area, so hopefully
I was back home, man. I mean, Coach Lynch, the head coach at Deer Park, and then Newman Smith, and we were like, we couldn't stay there long term. We liked Newman Smith, but like I said, if you remember, they split the school, and so he at least had the foresight to understand that we had to go, because our freshman class, and you know this from being up there and with those teams, we had 40 football players in that freshman class.
Not enough, yeah.
And they didn't win a game, and they didn't score a point.
Mm.
So basically, when Creekview opened, they let anybody go over there that wanted to. So basically, we were, you know, everybody that was really good, they ended up going over there.
Yeah.
And it was a hard situation. So, you know, like when they were seniors, there were only 7 of them left, which playing 6A football with 7 seniors, you already know.
Yeah.
So because of that, you know, after we won those 7 games, coach was looking and he wanted to get back to Houston. You know, I'm from there. I lived within an hour of, you know, downtown Houston my entire life, and I was born downtown Houston. So all my family, all my friends, everybody was in that area. So getting back home was, you know, there were 2 young children, and then grandparents being around there. I mean, that was huge. So he took the Westfield job, and I was blessed enough to get to go with him. And, you know, there's always a reason, right? So, you know, they were coming off an 0-10 football season when we walked in there.
When you walk into that situation, what did you take away from your Newman Smith, you know, experience in terms of walking in there? And it's been a little bit rough that first year. You know, now you're walking into a situation where they're 0-10, probably much earlier than July this time, I hope. You know, with enough time to, you know, probably get them a strength conditioning program. But what were some of the things that you were able to learn from that first time around at OC that you were able to apply the second time?
Yeah, it was crazy because, you know, we'd actually played Westfield when Emory Ballard was the head coach.
Okay.
His last 2 years coaching high school ball, 92, 93. So we had played them, and we split with them. And that was the years they had the offensive line that averaged 300 pounds, anchored by Octavius Bishop. So they had, you know, Octavius that went to Texas, another kid went to SEC. I mean, they were huge, right? So we're thinking Spring Westfield, man, we're going here and, you know, we should be good. Got these, you know, linemen or whatever. And we knew they were 0-10, but you know how stuff happens.
For sure.
So I get there and we get, you know, it was funny because, and you know how fast stuff happens in this business. So coach interviews on Wednesday and they offer him the job. So he's driving back Wednesday night. He calls me. So I get in my car and I drive straight to Houston because I've got to be there on Thursday morning. So, like, I'm sure we passed each other on 45.
That's crazy.
So I'm at the school, you know, 7 o'clock on Thursday morning. And then I stay there all day long. And then I go to athletic period. So I go to varsity athletic period and I go to freshman athletic period. And here again, this is 6A high school that has, you know, at that time it had 3,500 students. And there were 60 football players in the varsity athletic period.
3,500 students with 60 players.
3,500 students. So I go to, and not many linemen. And then I go to the freshman athletic period, and there's 33 kids in the freshman athletic. So that basically at the end of the day, there were less than 100 football players for 3 grades. And I'm like, there's something bad wrong here, man.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, that team that we just left in Newman Smith, they beat this, breaks off this team, you know? And I'm just like, what in the world?
Yeah.
And so anyway, boom, sign all the paperwork, drive back Thursday night, and then I start on Monday. You know, we both start on Monday, April 1st, my wife's birthday. So, you know, we didn't get to do any off season. It was straight into, you know, just teaching them how to do things.
Yeah.
And then we did spring ball with 6 coaches. And And then that first year, the thing I'll tell you, and it's still true, those kids, they're tough. They wanted to be coached. They made zero excuses about what had happened the year before when they were over. And we just went to work, had a great summer in the weight room. And then we went out and, found a way we went 6-5.
How about that?
So went 6-4 the first year, got in the playoffs, got beat in the first round. And I guess that's probably part of it is, getting there July 9th at Newman Smith, it was kind of crazy because nobody came to the weight room and lifted in the summer.
Yeah.
We never saw the team. But like on Tuesday nights, they'd show up and throw 7-on-7 and run last year's plays. And it was a weird deal because we'd just go out there and watch them throw and catch. We'd talk to a couple of them, and then most of them, they'd get in the car and leave. And it was like, weird deal. And then first day of football, we're out here, and it's like, so these kids, they were up there all summer. We were grinding, and they just trusted us and believed in each other and went out and played. And, that's where it started.
Yeah, able to get the success going out. It's interesting. I have a brother. He's the head coach at Leander High School. And when he started, Leander's very similar. It was a big school. When he got there, wasn't a lot of players. And that was like, that he called me. That's why I kind of reacted like that. He called me. He's like, man, we got 90 kids total in athletics, and we're playing a 6A schedule. I'm like, God dang. So it sounds very similar. And one of the big things, when they're having success or not, whatever, he's always excited about seeing more and more people come to the football team. Did you guys see the same kind of deal? Were you able to see kind of get those numbers back inflated again?
Yeah, it took a while. The first thing we did was, and I don't know. This is just what the people there were telling us, because nobody cares.
Yeah.
So
on to the next
just
round.
get it done.
Yeah.
But, if anybody was an issue or a problem, instead of working and dealing and working through it, it was easier to get rid of.
I got you.
And people not, they'd always start the year with 5 teams, a varsity, 2 JVs, and 2 freshmen. But then after the grading period, then they would have 3 teams. So just going into it like that. So basically what we did was we had amnesty program. So we'd set up a table in the cafeteria every day, and we'd stand on the bus ramp where 3,500 kids were walking down.
Yeah.
And so, there's 3 of us, and we'd spread out, and anybody that looked like they could be playing football that you didn't recognize, it's like, hey, so we were doing that before school in the cafeteria. And we got about, we probably got 90 kids signed up. And out of those 90, we probably got about 30 that stuck.
Yeah.
But my 5th period PE class, I got half of our defensive line out of it. And so we were able to add some pieces just from giving people a chance. And then the biggest thing that we did was, the whole time that I was there is we never had, we always had between the 90 and 95% passing rate with our football players. Just because, freshmen, if you lose them as freshmen, you never get them back.
Tough, yeah. It's tough after that.
So the key is you can't lose them as freshmen. So like our freshman football, we'd practice Monday, we'd practice Tuesday, and then Wednesday, instead of practicing, they'd go to tutorials.
Okay.
I didn't care. We won great. We won more than we lost, but it was more important to get that academic base as a freshman.
Yeah.
And then go play on Thursday. So, but anyway, we went from 90 people when we walked in the door to before the school split with Dekaney in 2007, we had 335.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And what's funny? I'm not an older guy, but around that time, man, that's just what you had to do to build success. And now it's called culture, and it's got to have all these fancy words to it. But you guys just built a heck of a culture there. I mean, just as simple as that. I'm sure you guys weren't even thinking about it like that as you were doing it, but that's what it was.
No,
right?
I mean, it's just trying to do things right and
That's
love
right.
on kids, teach them, treat them the right way, and hold them accountable. And that's the one thing I learned early on for myself is that you can hold kids accountable, okay, and you can have high standards. You can, because they're not going to give you any more than what you expect.
That's right.
So if you expect little, you're going to get little.
Right.
And just from some coaches that I've been around, they were scared to go to that next level because they thought they would run people off. And I decided that if we ran people off, then that wasn't what the ones we wanted anyway.
That's right.
And anyway, I'm going to bet on my kids every time. So it was a great learning experience going through 2 complete rebuilds back to back.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, in 2004, awesome opportunity arises. You get named the head coach there at Westfield High School. Very straightforward question. Why were you the guy for the job?
Well, I mean, having been there, coming in and being the right-hand guy as assistant head coach OC in 2000, and the, administration and the players and the parents, watching, what we did and getting the program to where it was, which we'd won 30 games in 4 years. So I think we're 30 and 15. Had a quarterfinal run the second year. So we go from 0-10 to 6-5 to 12-2.
Crazy. And
get beat by Lufkin in the quarterfinals and Dome in overtime. And then they won state 2 weeks later. So we had a really good team. And they mostly graduated, and then we didn't make the playoffs the next 2 years. We went 6-4 and 7-3 and didn't get in because they weren't taking that many back then.
Yeah, it used to take.
So we had good football teams.
That's right.
But we didn't get in the playoffs. And, our head coach retired. His wife got sick and the job opened up. So I just think that having seen me work every day for 4 years and they knew what I was about and they felt like that, we could continue what we were doing and hopefully build upon it. I was just blessed and, got the opportunity because they could have opened it up and hired anybody they wanted to in the state.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, people would have been crawling and scratching for that gig.
I mean, I was just blessed.
Yeah. Amen. Well, you get 10 wonderful years there, and you have a ton of success over your time there. How were you able to continue to build that culture that you guys had built in your, while you were the offensive coordinator, but kind of put that Coach Meekins spin on it, your own feel, your own beliefs and everything into that head coaching role?
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, I think that, not making the playoffs for 2 years, it wasn't a talent deal. It was we had internal issues. So like 1 year, it was a junior linebacker and a senior offensive lineman, and there was some beef going on between those two.
Yeah.
Over a girl, and it split our locker room. So, it taught me that we weren't as disciplined as we needed to be. When I got the job, obviously I retained everybody, and then a lot of them ended up leaving, and I was able to bring in Randy. But when we were going through the process, because I got the job December 1st, and so we had about 2.5 weeks before Christmas. And then we knew we had to be up and running when we came back in January. And, We knew we had to be more disciplined. I didn't feel like, not just me, but we didn't feel like that we competed and finished. And so we met, and, you know, I told the coaches, I met with everybody individually, and I said, okay, listen, I want you to write down 4 or 5 things that we're doing that we don't need to do, that we're not doing that we need to do. And then I want you to tell me, you know, how you see yourself fitting on the staff and where you see yourself moving forward in the future. So I gave everybody that assignment. And then when I met with them individually, we talked about where they saw themselves now and moving forward, what their goals were, because that's one thing that, you know, as a head coach, I'm going to look at an assistant coach. If you want to be an offensive coordinator, then I'm going to look at you different than somebody that just wants to be a position coach.
Yeah.
And so I need to know that, because I'm going to hold you to a different standard. You know, you can't be late.
Right.
All right. Ever. Because if you're late and you're leading men, you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So there's just certain things that, you know, so, and then we went through that. We ended up getting like 70 different items, and we went through, and then obviously everything that kept popping up pulled out. So out of that whole situation, that's where we came up with, okay, this is what we got to do. We're still going to do our regular off season because it was good. I mean, I've been doing that since Deer Park, and so that part of it. But we started competing. So we drafted teams. We made captains on teams. They elected a captain. We gave the captains all the instructions. They had to go back and relay it to their team members, and then we competed. And if they couldn't, you know, articulate what needed to be done in the competition, then it cost them points. So we were trying to develop leaderships along with these competitions. So once a week for 6 weeks, I mean, we competed. And I mean, it was competition now. These guys got after it. And then, you know, I read the book, Good to Great, during that Christmas break. My parents gave it to me for Christmas. I read it, couldn't put it down. And, you know, it talks about there's 500, you know, Fortune 500 companies, but the whole book is there's only 11 that are elite. And what makes them elite? And what happens is everybody starts getting involved in things outside of what made them a Fortune 500 company. So they get spread too thin. They're not focused. So it's talking about there's only one thing that you can be great at. So we talked about it, and we decided that the thing that we were going to do is we were going to give effort, and we were going to give great effort, because effort covers up everything else.
That's right.
And so every day had to be Super Bowl Sunday during athletic period. And that was it. From the time they walked in till the time that they left, I mean, it was a-holes and elbows every single day, so that the only thing they knew was wide open.
Right.
It had to be wide open every day from that effort standpoint. And then we did boot camp, which, you know, some of the teams, you know, were doing it. You know, Lamar did it, you know, in the 80s. Converse Judson, they were doing it with D.W. Rutledge, and then continued with Coach Rackley when they were really good. So we knew we had to do that. So those were the things that we brought into the program that off season that, you know, some of the things maybe some people didn't think that our kids would do and rise to the occasion. And it goes back to, no, they're going to do it. And because that's what we expect. And, you know, me having been there for 4 years and running the weight room, because I ran the weight room. So I was the one chewing on them and making them do the hard stuff and, you know, go places they had never been before. They trusted me, so they matched it. And obviously that 2004 season, we were blessed.
Yeah, for sure, man. And your time there was unbelievable. 7 district championships, 10 playoff appearances every year that you were there. I do have a question for you that might be a little tough to answer. Now, as we talk, that 1998 version of Coach Meekins as an first-time offensive coordinator versus that 2003 Coach Meekins as an offensive coordinator was probably two different men in terms of the ability just to get up in the box, call plays, develop guys, make sure they're ready for ready for a game on Friday. What was the difference between year one head coach, Coach Meekins, and then that 10th year, that last year there in 2014? How were you able to grow?
Oh, I mean, just it was a hard deal just from the standpoint that, my first year as head coach, we go from 6-4 and not in the playoffs. So I get the job, and then we just grind them for 8 months straight. And, we put it together, get hot, and we go all the way to the state championship game that first year, get beat because I wasn't as good as I needed to be. I needed to call better plays, and we needed to get off the field a little bit. Tyler Lee they did a phenomenal job. So that kind of propelled us. And then, we had a nice little 3-year run there where we were the state finals, semifinals. We get beat on a fumble return for a touchdown at the end of the game, which was unfortunate, but it happens. And then we get beat in the quarterfinals. And then they split the school in half. So I lost half of my kids.
Yeah, that's tough. Just period.
So you're talking about, where I was from my first 3 years as head football coach to when I left there in 2014 and went to U of H. Again, going through that split, having half my kids gone, going 2 years without getting a quarterback from the middle school. 2010, 2011, I literally had to take wide receivers in the off season and teach them how to play quarterback in 8 months. So I grew more through that offensively and being a head football coach and being able to, solve problems. The thing I'm most proud of, because I studied it when I went through it, is, everybody dips and everybody bottoms out. And we went through that whole split, and our worst year was 6-4. So we didn't have a losing season through it. We missed the playoffs that 6-4 year because we lost the first game of district. And, I knew then that we weren't going to get in because there were 3 teams that we just couldn't compete with. And so we had to have won that one. And we won it the year before, didn't win it that year. And then, with, 5'7", 150-pound left-handed wide receiver in 2011, we grinded and then got hot and got back to the quarterfinals. And then once we did that, it was like, oh, okay. And we had built the numbers back up. Yep. We'd gotten kids out. And anyway, so the last 4 years that I was there, they were like the first 3.
Yeah.
So we actually had almost a total rebuild in the middle of that little time span there. I'm more proud of what we did on the back end than what we did on the front end with the numbers that we had and the talent.
Right, and just the challenges and obstacles, being able to kind of.
It was hard now because once you won like that.
Yeah. Oh man, it's tough to.
It's tough. And nobody had no one has any higher expectations for anything that I put my name on than I do. I can promise you that. So
that's right.
it was a tough time. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it wasn't tough because, I just didn't want to have a losing season. I knew it was going to be hard.
Yeah.
Because just everybody, Judson got split. They're 2-8, 3-7. It's just you can't help it.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting when you just I'll pull out a sheet and I just look at the records and like I don't know, I didn't know any of this. Like I didn't realize these were some of the challenges, but it's a testament to what every program has to be willing to endure. They're going to have their own challenges, their own obstacles, regardless of where you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a testament to our kids and our coaching staff.
Yeah.
Because I had an unbelievable coaching staff, which I think I'm a Guinness Book of World Record answer. I have 3 offensive line coaches at Westfield High School that are all in the NFL right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's probably pretty tough to beat right there. Especially when you start talking about the emphasis that you put on the O-line and the trenches. That's probably pretty good. You had those guys roll through there then.
Yeah, man, they were phenomenal. But we had just great assistant coaches, man.
Yeah.
They loved kids. They worked hard. It was important. We couldn't have got it back to where it was without any of them.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, let's kind of move on to the next chapter, which is, although you've had a whole career within itself right there, and that and those years. You kind of make a pretty sizable transition here. 2015, you had the opportunity to go to University of Houston to be the fullbacks tight ends coach. How did that whole situation go down? How did you decide to make that jump? And what were the details of this situation?
Yeah, so I mean, I was I'd pretty much done everything at that point. I was getting a little bored, just keeping it real.
Mm-hmm.
And felt like I was getting a little stale because staff was unbelievable. The kids, we rebuilt it again. We got it up, and we were doing well. So like a year and a half before, I started thinking about, what's next.
Right.
And I didn't want to go to another high school because love Westfield High School, everything about it, kids, unbelievable. So I needed a challenge. And so I'm like, you know what? I think I could do that. I'd watched, Alan Waddell go to college from Lamarck. And then I watched Art Briles go. So I always kind of watched that. But you got to understand, when I was coming up, people weren't going from high school to college.
No, it wouldn't. Yeah, I was going to say you were one of the earlier guys in that deal. Yeah.
For whatever reason, it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I watched that happen around 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always in the back of my mind. And then, I got my master's with Clarence McKinney. And Clarence had been coaching in the city at HISD schools, North Shore. And so we were friends. And when Kevin Sumlin got the U of H job, he hired him. And I'm like, okay. So I was kind of watching and, I'm like, my girls are getting older. My oldest had graduated and Madison was freshman. And we talked, and she's like, I'm not going to another high school, but if you go to college or the NFL, then I'm good. I'm like, okay. So I started putting feelers out there, talking to people that I trusted when they came through Westfield to recruit. And I said, what do I need to do? And they said, well, you just need to do what you're doing right now. You need to talk to people, tell them what you're thinking, and then, go from there. So, so the short story is, Coach Hurt, the U of H job's open. And I guess that was when Kevin went to A&M, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Got a lot of things going on. So Coach Herman was interviewing. Well, Tom had recruited, Westfield for 8 or 9 years when he was at Sam Houston, when he was at Texas State, when he was at Rice. Even Iowa State, he came a couple of times. But I hadn't seen him in 3 years since he went to Ohio State because he basically recruited Dallas. So anyway, he called me and he said, "Hey, man," he goes, "I want you to call or email or text the AD, on my behalf. I'm trying to get some of the Texas high school coaches." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." I said, "You need a tight end coach?" And he goes, "Well, you're my first call." And I said, "So if you get the job, I'm going to coach tight ends?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "It's going to be a great letter." And so anyway, I hung up, and I'd talked to a school the year before, and we couldn't get it worked out in time. Okay. That was in the Big 12, but I thought I was leaving the year before, but it got too late. And I'm like, I'm not leaving Westfield late. So, anyway, we go get beat in the semifinals, by Joey in Cedar Hill that next week.
Yeah.
And, anyway, he gets named. I don't hear from him for 8 days. And so I'm like, and during this time, that school was coming back. So we were talking again. But I wanted to be in Houston because Madison was halfway through her junior year. I didn't want her to have to leave, Tomball Memorial. So, but I'm like, man, am I going to hear from this guy? Anyway, 8 days later, get the phone call and it's a done deal. So I was blessed and got to stay in Houston and go to UH, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal situation because, as you've been in this business way longer than I have, man, sometimes it's hard to be that fortunate to land a spot where where you are, where you want to be.
Tom Herman gave me my shot in college, and forever indebted to him. And,
that's big time. Now, been a long time head coach. I'm sure you've seen a ton, as we already discussed, not even a fraction of it. I'm sure you've seen a ton of different things. What were some of the things as you transition to the collegiate level? Obviously, now you have recruiting. I know you guys recruited the Halls to a certain extent, but now you got recruit. Now you have, a couple of different things that, don't necessarily apply at the high school level. What were some of the things you weren't necessarily prepared for as you took that job?
Well, obviously, spring recruiting.
Yeah.
Trying to map that out because, I'm like, well, I'm going to go hit all the Aldine schools this day, and then I'm going to hit the Klein schools. And then I'm like, oh, I got to go to spring practice, so I can only make 2 a day. So I can't do that. So you know how it is. Everybody's busy. So I just had to kind of figure some of that out. I had great guys there. I mean, that helped me a lot. Derek Wareheim, Drew Maringer, Major, Applewhite. I mean, that staff was, Kenny Pope, that was the offensive staff that we went in there, and they were all unbelievable guys. They're all still friends with all of them today. And they helped me out a lot from the recruiting aspect and being organized. I tell people the hardest thing going from high school to college was the volume of defense. Like you just didn't see that. And I mean, you could see an entire season's worth of defense in one football game in college.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And, so just, learning how to game plan and realize that everything had to be really, really, really specific because it has to be good versus everything and stuff like that. So everything else is football. Football's football. Coaching kids is coaching kids.
Right.
Because of the way I was brought up, from being assistant O-line coach to running back coach to receiver coach to when I was head coach, I called the plays and coached the quarterbacks. I coached every single position on offense. So it was perfect for me when I got to college and I was coaching tight ends who had to be receivers and be,
Yeah, absolutely.
Attach tackles to the box.
Right.
So I had a pretty good base from doing that. So, but that and the recruiting.
Yeah, and so I was going to say on the flip side question, obviously same kind of lead up to the question. You had all this experience. What did being a former head football coach and coordinator at the high school level, what did that do to help you be great at your job?
Well, I mean, I was a good assistant before I became a head coach.
Yeah.
I tell people that, that's how you become a head coach. You got to try to be great and just grow where your feet are, and just try to be the best you can be the head coach of your position, or be the best OC that you can be. And then people will notice. Right. And, so having been through that and being a head coach, once you get your eyes open as a head football coach, because you can't describe it, you can't explain it, and you can't help people understand it until they sit in that chair. And every guy that's ever left and gotten a job, they call me and they go, I had no idea. But once your eyes are open, you can't see anything except through that lens.
Yeah.
So I was able to, I think, see things and try to anticipate things. And I was able to do things behind the scenes that didn't let things escalate or get to a point
right.
where the head coach had to get involved in it, because I could see what was happening, and then I would go interject myself. So I was a much better assistant in college than I was in high school, because I was just able to sit. Before, I didn't care, because I had my job and I did my job.
That was the thing. Yeah, that was your focus. Yeah.
Now you just saw stuff. So
yeah.
You know how it is. Something all the time going on, and especially with people now. So when you can go interject and kind of head stuff off, then things don't get to a place where there's issues.
Amen. Now, very quickly, man, you're able to, everybody's, quote unquote dream job is probably different, but if a position at University of Texas or some of these other, marquee universities open up, I'm going to be a line, out to wazoo for it. In 2017, you followed Coach Herman over to the University of Texas. Yep. I can only imagine how cool of an opportunity that is. Just being a Texas guy yourself, regardless of where you went to college and all that. We're all somewhat Longhorn fans to some capacity. What was that experience like? Just being able to, very quickly transition over and be, kind of on a top tier team.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it at U of H. I mean, we did a really good job there, and the kids did a phenomenal job and responded. And that's what opened up the door, obviously, for Coach Herman to go to Texas. And, just about the entire staff, went from Houston to Austin. So it was very familiar. And, two of my brothers went to Texas. So, I'd been there a bunch. And, it was a huge honor. And, I was super excited. And I mean, just every day it's just like, man, I get to work here, and we get to go, recruit and compete and do all of those things. And, it was a blessing, and, didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to, but we were proud of the work that we put in and what we were able to do there.
Yeah. And as crazy as your career has kind of been in terms of bouncing around and it's school splitting and all the things we've talked about. One thing you hadn't experienced at this point in time is just that rough phone call of, "Hey man, we've been let go," right? And so you do experience that. Just talk about that type of transition, especially for you being that late in your career. Yeah.
That's real, because, I've been doing this for almost 30 years at that point.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever told you that you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And then, you go through that, and it's like, all right. So it's just like losing a football game. You don't ever look outwards. You always look inwards. So you had to look inside and self-evaluate, and, you feel like hammered dog do. And, so you got to go through it and process it. And, at the end of the day, it taught me that it's a business.
Yeah.
And, you see it every day, because in the NFL, there's Black Monday.
Yeah.
Right. But you kind of numb to it, because it's always, somebody else. So it's like, that stinks for them, but then you move on.
Right.
But until you walked a mile in their shoes,
Yeah.
It's like, and it's just a lot of uncertainty at that point. So, I mean, it's like, okay, so I don't have a job. When's the last check coming?
Right. Yeah. All these other details.
What's open?
Yeah. Right.
What's open?
Yeah.
Where are we going? So here you got your wife, and, what are we going to do?
That's right.
You can't answer that question. I don't know, baby. I mean, you just got to, we just got to trust God that He's going to put us exactly where He wants us. And so, He has every time. I mean, every step of the way in my career, I can see His hand on my life, and I've always been right where I'm supposed to be. And that's the only place I ever want to be at the end of the day. So, I mean, when it happened at Texas, I had to come to grips with the fact that, couldn't stay there, and it's business. And so, okay, well, what are we going to do? And then Coach Holgerson, linked up with him, and I was able to come back home for 4 years, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, just briefly hit on, you hooked up with him. Like, what was that like? Did you already know him? Like, obviously the opportunity to stay at the FBS level, obviously the opportunity to stay in Texas and then go back to a place you were just at and where you spent majority of your career in the city of Houston. It's phenomenal. So how did that work out?
So it was a funny deal, because the same time that Coach Herman was recruiting Westfield High School, during the exact same period, Dana got to Tech in 2000, and he tells the story of they had to go recruiting, so they just pulled the map out. And how Leach is. I mean, he's just like, all right, where's everybody going? He goes, Sonny, you go to Dallas. He goes, Dana, you go to Houston. Well, Dana had never been to Houston. So Dana comes to Houston. We've got a couple of receivers at that time. And then Willie Amendola, Danny's dad, was defensive coordinator when I was the OC. So we actually worked together. So he was recruiting Danny that was playing at the Woodlands. So Dana was in Westfield High School from 2000 through 2009 when he left U of H as OC. So the exact same. So got to know him, come through recruiting. They watch you coach. They watch you run your program. I was head coach for the last 5 years that he was coming through. And then, Dana's gone to West Virginia from 2010 all the way until he took the U of H job in 19.
Yeah. And
I had talked to him one time. But after it went down, somebody on U of H's staff said, I think that we're going to have a spot. He said, you need to text Dana. So I texted him. I hadn't talked to him in 9 years. He hit me back. And then didn't hear from him. And then for 2 weeks, because it was in recruiting at the before signing day, and then get a phone call. I go to Houston. He offers me the job, and then I'm working there. So, I mean, again, it was those early relationships that we made when I was at Westfield and he was young coach recruiting.
Yeah, that's awesome how important these relationships are. Obviously we talk about it a ton in the business and on the podcast, but just all these stops for you, I mean, it's all just familiar faces, guys you work with. It's kind of crazy how important that is.
That's the one thing that I didn't know as a young coach that I would have done a better job of is networking.
Yeah.
Because I've always either been at work or I've been at home. And then I got involved, with the Greater Houston Football Coaches Association, and I was on the Texas High School Coaches Association State Board of Directors.
Yep.
So I got to know all these high school guys, but I would have done a better job of that because I didn't start any of that until I was a head football coach.
Right.
But I kind of missed out on some early years of I should have networked more, but that's what I tell everybody, man. Just network.
Yeah, well, that's what the podcast is for. You probably helped out a group of guys just by talking about that and the importance.
I hope so.
And you're able to enjoy some success at the University of Houston and time there, 12-2 season there in 2021. Great being back at home. Recruiting the area, but once again, it comes knocking, and it's time as the time is up there. So once again, now you've went through the transition before. How was it the second time around?
Well, I mean, didn't matter. I mean, I knew I was going to be there until I wasn't there. So, the first time, I mean, having been through it and understanding that, there's things that are out of your control.
Yeah.
So you can't control the things you can control. Don't worry about the rest of it. So we just put our head down and we were, at peace with it and knew that good Lord was going to open another door for us, and didn't know where. I always knew I was going to end up back in high school.
Yeah.
I mean that was my plan the whole time. I just didn't know when. So, looked at some out of state opportunities, and then our parents are getting older. Our daughters are here.
Yeah.
It's just that point in time where is that really what we wanted? Because nothing was open in the state at the time. Anyway, good Lord opened the door for us,
and here you are, Lutheran South Academy there in Houston, and you're doing well, and kind of back in that original seat that kind of got everything spinning around, man. Coach, let me tell you, man, I've absolutely enjoyed this podcast with you, man, just sharing your journey. And I'm sure I missed a ton of stories that one day we're going to have to share some more of this stuff, because I know you got a lot in there, man. But I do appreciate the time, Coach. I don't know if you're a social media guy. At the end of the podcast, I always ask guys to drop their socials. I don't know if you're into that.
I mean, I've got, Twitter at Corby Meekins.
Hey, Corby Meekins, okay.
My Instagram, I don't know. It's probably the same thing. I've got one. I don't do Facebook because I figure everybody that needs to know where I'm at, they know where I'm at. So
that's right. Well, we'll drop that Twitter in the show notes, man, and let people follow you, keep up with your journey. And I do appreciate the time. It's been my pleasure. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and share, and hopefully we were able to help some young coaches that were coming up.
Indeed. Well, I appreciate you, Coach, and we'll talk soon, okay?
All right, thank you.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, Visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.